It's the same way it happens online when if you're abused online, what we encourage people is to report the abuse as opposed to engage in a back and forth with the abuser or the group of abusers. And we also encourage people using, these tools to continue with their positive messaging.
I'm Natasha Kimani. I'm a governance and public policy expert and the host of Talk to Me Direct podcast. In this series, I speak with 8 incredible thinkers in Africa, people working to solve complex challenges across the board. We discuss the civic space in Africa, the physical and online spaces where people come together to exercise their rights in shaping our societies. In this episode, I speak with a leader in the civic tech space. Irene Mwendwa leads Pollicy, an organization that conducts groundbreaking research and advocacy on technology and feminism in Africa, and how that affects the ability of women's participation in politics. Welcome, Karibu.
Asante sana. Thank you very much for having me.
Irene, before we get into the difficult and deeper questions around social movements, because today we are speaking about social movements, I'm curious, what led you towards Pollicy?
Well, ever since I joined university and I did my law degree, I've always been aligning with a lot of movement building work and a lot of work that pertains to social issues in our society. I remember just growing up in class, I would always ask the teacher, is that really fair? I'd be the one asking, why are you punishing this over the other? So I think naturally I'm really aligned to asking difficult questions and also asking for accountability. And in that quest, then I've managed to work in different civil society organizations, organize different movements with my friends, and I use my personal time also just asking the difficult questions. And this way I challenge myself and I challenge everyone around me.
Thank you. I think, Irene, just unpacking on the social movements that you've built in the past, Pollicy is a very unique organization because it uses data to leverage just information and shifting how we see ourselves as Africans and the data that we consume. How do you do that, and why is it important in the work towards building strong social movements on the continent?
That's exactly what we do. And I'd like to start off with a question that I'd pose to the audience. Do you know if there's an African who has built the equivalent of Facebook? So Pollicy, together with other civic tech organizations in the region, we're asking ourselves, how can Africans be at the forefront of also building better digital technologies, creating a safer internet that looks like Africans, works for Africans, and is by Africans? The other thing at Pollicy, we've tried to do that really tries to break that hierarchy. When it comes to ICT, education and ICT, the field itself, it's very... there's a lot of jargon that's involved. There's a lot of technical work that's involved. So at Pollicy, we are using data to try and break that so that fellow Africans can understand and see how they can improve their realities as they use the internet and as they build different innovation and tools. One of the things that I would speak about is something like language. Most of the internet is built on the English language. Your grandma uses the internet one way or another. Our friends who may not have the highest literacy levels also use the internet, but most of them are forced to program, to use, and to exercise in English, whereas there are local languages that can also be employed or that can be brought out in these internet services to be used effectively. If you look at apps that are very commonly used in our region, say M-Pesa, that's mobile money, it was... And it continues to be popular because it was localized to our needs. I mean, it says M-Pesa.
Let me just touch on that because while using digital tools has been phenomenal and transformative, it leaves a number of people out of the conversation.
True.
Because while a lot of people are having conversations on Twitter or X, some are not or are unaware of what's taking place. How do we then ensure that the social movements and conversations we are building online are transferred offline as well? How can we do that?
Okay, so from where we stand as Pollicy, we know that the work to build a better internet, for instance, and to use digital tools is being done by human beings.
Yeah.
And we recognize their efforts, and the information that's collected from them comes from other people behind the scene and behind them. So what we always encourage is that we recognize communities, where they're at and how they organize. And in that recognition, then there are always champions in different communities who are always able to translate this information in languages or in ways that the people who are not organized online can understand. If I look at how some movements are organized, many right now are very organic and some are very formalized. And in the formal movements, many organize under projects or programs, and they have networks, they've selected community champions. So there are models with which you can use to really ensure that this information passes down to the ground. But also remembering at the heart of it all is the power of traditional media. We know the radio to date is still the most powerful tool to share information. So it's also, important to engage journalists so that they can be able to pass this information either as news, either as, information on their different programs and so on.
I mean, thank you so much for that. And there's something you spoke about earlier, building safer internet, and that's one of your priorities. And we know the backlash that women and minorities face when they're trying to engage and trying to build movements. So there are a lot of people out there who want to join the conversation, but there may be fear for their lives, for their safety, for their careers. How do we then ensure that we are building movements that keep people safe, and more so women and marginalized and communities and minorities?
For sure, it takes a concerted effort. It's not just by researchers, it's not just by civil society. It also takes the players who provide these tools to also ensure that their systems are safe. So what we do at Pollicy, Natasha, and the audience who are listening to us, is to try and ensure there is a concerted effort. And what do we mean by this? We know the role of the tech companies, we know the role of our governments, we know the role of us as users of the internet. We also need to practice ethical or what now many people are calling cyber hygiene when you're using the internet, so that the developers and the people creating these online tools can continue to build better. So Pollicy has led with research of how we use the internet as African women and as Africans, and we found sometimes it's really out of our control if the other players do not come and play their part. And if I can use two examples, please excuse me. We did a study in the Ugandan election in 2021 and the 2022 Kenya elections. And we just wanted to find out how women politicians are using social media tools as opposed to their male opponents. And so many things came out. So many women are not able to use these tools because of innately the design, which enables for women to be abused haphazardly. And at the end of it all, the language again, which I had started off by saying that language plays a critical role because many of these companies do not have a huge, content moderation that is very local or localized.
I know a lot of people who want to be involved in social movements. They're scared. Particularly women, minorities. They're afraid if they put themselves out there, they will be harmed physically and, in other ways. How do we create a safe space and how do we assure them? What are the practical things that we could do, to ensure that we have more women and minorities participating eagerly so in these social movements?
Yeah, I hear you. And there's something we are working on at Pollicy called digital resilience, where we are building women to just be digital resilient. The same way every day you're resilient in life, we would also love for women to also have that digital resilience so that they can be able to exercise and enjoy these digital tools just like everyone else, and for these tools to work for them well. And what led us to this, or some of these projects that we work that are building women's digital resilience, was out of some evidence we found when we conducted a research in the 2021 elections in Uganda and the 2022 elections in Kenya, where we found women leaders are afraid of engaging on social media to campaign or using social media for political campaigns because they're afraid of being abused online, of course, because there's doxing. We also saw evidence of body shaming. So out of that, we were able to find that there are different mechanisms that we can employ women to build their digital resilience. And one is for them to understand these tools. Many were able to take them through simple tools, what we use every day for our work, your Zoom, your Google Meets, your Teams. In the 2021 elections in Uganda, they were only allowed to do online campaigning. There are no physical campaigns because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we really employed them to organize online, use WhatsApp, use any tool they can to build or create momentum around their issues or the issues that they were running for. And in the Kenya election, we found that despite all this, even the media has a huge role to play to ensure that women are protected from abuse happening online. How they report on women politicians as they campaign really matters because it can transfer into online trending topics where women exactly. And we found that it's very important that they play. They're ethical in their reporting and they remain steadfast in also promoting women in politics in Kenya.
So what I hear you say is that African media, because we want to expand this to the continent, has a responsibility to play in shaping positive narratives around social movements.
Truly.
Thank you for that. We've spoken about online safety. Let's go offline. Now, it's one thing to be a keyboard warrior and thump your chest, but when you're on the ground and there's tear gas behind you, it's another story altogether. How do we prepare for those moments, the unprecedented moments where a stone will come and you didn't see it coming, or you are with a group of people and suddenly you're not?
It's the same way it happens online when if you're abused online, what we encourage people is to report the abuse as opposed to engage in a back and forth with the abuser or the group of abusers. And we also encourage people using, these tools to continue with their positive messaging. So when it comes to offline organizing, because now most things are happening online and then move to the offline world, almost always in Kenya, when you take the necessary measures, you report to the police that you're organizing a peaceful march, there's almost always people who are going to heckle you. And this is exactly what happens online. But what will happen is that we'll continue with our march. So if you're online and you're organizing, you continue with your messaging and do not relent. In case, stones are thrown at us, in case... tear gas.
Is there stone insurance, out of curiosity?
Here some insurance have protection for protests. Actually, it's called protest insurance, something like that. Okay. Here there are some insurance who cover for that.
We should give discounts to social movements.
Please, yes. Just cover us for free because we are really protesting for a good cause to ensure that more girls and women are protected in Kenya and in other regions in Africa. And just to say, especially when it pertains women, really, there is no need for harm. There's no need for physical harm because it's going to continue the same narrative that happens online, that you can heckle women online, you can also heckle them offline. So,
Irene, I'm even more curious around, because we've spoken about tech. How can we leverage tech and data to ensure that we are amplifying social movements more? What is the place of tech and data in ensuring successful social movements?
The role of data in all this is for sure evidence making, because we'll be able to talk about the numbers, we'll be factual, and it will not be hearsay when you're going to your MCA, when you're going to at the Africa Union level to ask or to make demands. The role of technology, however, is to also bring in the global community to see what's happening in other parts of the world.
Absolutely. Which
will in turn lead to overall support from the global community. You'll find that there are places where they will have had solved that issue using a different tool or using a different solution. So we're able to exchange ideas. If we share this, wide and far. The last thing I can say about the role of data and technology definitely is to also show the efforts being made by the different individuals. Sometimes we erase, sometimes when you see best person of the year, you don't know who is behind the best person of the year. It could be 30 individuals. So the role of data is to also recognize the efforts of the community around the individual champions or the movements that we're speaking about today.
So data is actually fantastic to ensure that people are not erased from the overall narrative and story. I really love that. What are the best practices available and present in building a safer internet and safe spaces for these social movements?
For sure, what Pollicy is doing and other civic techs, especially led by feminist women in Africa, is having open access training opportunities on digital safety. If you go to our website, you'll find there are several courses you can take in very simplistic language. We have broken down the jargon of password manager. We've really broken down to explain what this means for any person who's turning 18 years. Hell, even if you're 13, you're able to understand because we've broken down the language of some of these security, digital security trainings that are usually available online. The other role that Pollicy and other civic techs have been playing and will continue to play is to hold consultation forums. Consultation forums bring different stakeholders where we're able to share and say, during the election, for instance, media, you have no option but to report ethically. Local leaders, you have no option but to give this community space in your area to campaign well. And when it comes to engaging online, do not heckle them, do not put them on the spot. The other thing that we work on really to also ensure digital safety is to hold engagements and continue to conduct research about how we are using the internet every day, because there are different issues coming up, and painting the true picture as time goes by.
Irene, how about involving young people in these movements? Because there's a lot of talk across the globe that young people are not participating in democratic conversations and spaces. First of all, is the data correct when it comes to young people and engaging? And secondly, are they joining social movements? Are they interested? If not, how do we make them more interested? What are the things that we can do to show young people that this matters for you, for your life and the lives of those around you?
Again, that goes to show the power of data, because Africa is 65% is made up of youth. So there's really no other way to show that the youth are interested, because we are comprised of the youth in this region. The youth are very interested. However, some of the policies that exist are not up to date to give them room to exercise or engage in this, say, a safety movement or to engage safely. Many of them, of course, fear to be heckled online, as we have painted, and many of them also fear to be put on the spot. However, a few champions are coming up. There are very many programs right now being led by different organizations and well-wishers in Africa that are centering youth, African youth, to ensure that they are champions online. At Pollicy, we have a program called Digital Ambassador Program. We put out a call for a very short time. We got over 10,000 applications.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And
that's incredible.
I know. And we only needed about 30 in 2 countries in Africa. So you can imagine there is already a big a big appetite for youth to be digital ambassadors, for them to support these big tech companies to build better and to build solutions that will also enable them to come out strong, as opposed to, extraction of their ideas and extraction of their information.
Irene, you've spoken about AI. And we know a lot of Africans are underpaid as they build AI platforms behind the scenes, unrecognized, invisible. How do we ensure that they come to the forefront? Because I think we can leverage AI in social movements. How do we ensure that more Africans are participating in this space, and what will it take?
At the heart of Pollicy, again, recognition of the people who came before us. So Pollicy was involved in a 3-part study where we looked at African women in AI. And in 2020, 2021, and 2022, we were able to find that there are so many African women who have been part of building so many technologies we're actually using today, and now that have advanced into artificial intelligence. I think many were covered in last year's Times magazine, and we know there are more that we can also offer in terms of policies around artificial intelligence, the technology behind it, the machine learning models used, the natural language processing work. There are very many African women who we need to continue recognizing in their efforts. Very many young girls coming from universities, young women, coming out of universities are also looking up to them, and to join this field and to join the movement, really, because we want eventually to also say that this was built in Africa by Africans, and more so by African women.
There may be fear because, sometimes the civic society space requires a particular language and sometimes a particular accent, and a person may be like, listen, I'm a young kid. I haven't been to the right schools. I don't know the right people, but I want to engage. And I may not even know how to write a grant proposal. Is there a room for me to still access funding?
Yes, guess what? Very many, actually, I feel very many donors have now released their AI engagement or use of AI for grant making.
Yes.
So you can use artificial intelligence to support you with your writing.
Yes.
Of course, ethically, not copy pasting. You can also use peers, get a community of peers where you can recognize each other as peers and bounce off ideas off of each other, look at the language. And even as you pitch, it's important to also recognize yourself where you're at and say, we are starting off. Please give us a chance. We are not there yet, but we know we will get there. So it's important to always be truthful at any point or at any stage, which I feel has really advanced some movements here in Kenya, especially the women's movement.
Yeah. What was that spark that made you say, this is the thing that I want to do?
I have a very practical example. When I was in standard, I think there's a standard we used to knit for something called a fringe mat. And I grew up in a rural background, a rural town in Kenya. And on this particular day, I remember I had asked a friend, is this the stitch we are stitching on this fringe mat? And they told me yes. So that I made sure that I was complying with what the teacher had said. But when I got to school, I was told, no, that's not it. And the teacher punished us. I had to go back to the teacher and say, we didn't hear you. I don't know why you're punishing us. And I was quite young. And other kids were thinking, no, Irene. But eventually we got punished anyway. But
so perhaps maybe the key to being successful in social movements is to be punished a lot in school.
No. It's just to be quite confident and just communicating all the time.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the key, the stressor is to really communicate so that people can hear you and get you. If you give up, if you get tired in the middle, unfortunately, it's not the right thing, And
I think that's really important because, especially in the African context, when a young person speaks up, they're often considered, disrespectful.
Or an outlier.
Not knowing their place. So how then did you confidently trudge on, despite all these things, especially growing up in rural Kenya, where, again, the mechanisms are more stringent than the urban setting?
At the same time, there are teachers who would encourage me and would say, keep up, that's your uniqueness. That's what makes you you. That's what makes you Irene.
Irene, in an ideal world, what are some of the social movements that you would have wanted to initiate or wanted to see take place, first in Kenya and second in the continent, if you weren't working for Pollicy?
I'm already on one with a few friends, but something that enables young women, especially young student leaders, to continue with their leadership skills and their political life. Because most university students, especially in leadership, are brave people and have brilliant ideas, and they have a social backing from their university students to their parents to their communities. So something that can continue with that journey. So hopefully the systems will change and they're able to transition very well into youth politics. My other movement would definitely be one to promote a concept or a thing called third spaces. Third spaces is where beyond work, beyond going to the gym, beyond going to the cafe, you can go into Uhuru Park, sit and enjoy the park, especially in urban cities in Africa, where many spaces, especially communal spaces, have been either grabbed or have been utilized or are being utilized in the wrong way. So
free green spaces.
Yes.
Accessible to all.
Yes.
You know what? I'm going to get behind that movement. So when
Okay.
you're ready, please call me.
Okay.
And I'm going to campaign with that.
Okay,
And for
asante.
that with you.
Okay.
Irene, it has been my absolute pleasure and honor.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time and for your insights. And we appreciate you and your organization for continuing to build social movements that are changing this continent for the good. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us on this journey. Talk to Me Direct is going to be continuing to have conversations with other incredible thought leaders such as Irene Mwendwa, Executive Director, Pollicy.org. Please follow us and engage with us across all our social media platforms on Talk to Me Direct. Thank you, and until next time, my name is Natasha Kimani.
You've been listening to Talk to Me Direct, a podcast that spotlights a civic space in Africa today. Today's guest spoke about how minority communities are using research and advocacy on technology to push for inclusive participation in politics. In the next episode, I'll speak with a politician, Lindiwe Mazibuko, who has much experience on mobilizing underrepresented groups through training. Follow and subscribe on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts.